Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the Down in the Valley podcast. My name is Edson Ochoa. Once again, ready to talk to you all on Twitter Spaces, on Facebook, and of course on YouTube, all about the RGV FC Toros. I hope you all have been doing well. It was an interesting matchup to talk about, to say the least, and we've got a really great guest for you all tonight. But before we introduce the guest for this episode, I want to go ahead and introduce our co-host, Jacob Young. Jacob, how are you doing?
Doing well. Looking forward to the show. Hopefully my internet doesn't cut out. Come on, Spectrum from the Valley. Don't do that to us. I've had internet cutting out all day, and it's been because of the provider. But other than that, yeah, looking forward to talk soccer as much as I possibly can.
Yeah, definitely. Thankfully, I was at work all day, so honestly, I haven't been able to replicate that issue. But I believe you with Spectrum. Yeah, it's very iffy at times. But without further ado, I do want to go ahead and introduce you all to tonight's guest. He has a Twitter account, and it's not the first time on his show, actually. He was here during preseason to talk about some of the signings that the Toros had before the 2021 USL Championship season for the Toros. And now he is back to talk to us a little bit about what happened last Saturday at Weidner Field against Colorado Springs Switchbacks. He is USL Tactics himself, John Morrissey. John, how are you doing? It's been a while.
Yeah, doing really well. Happy to be back. And I can sympathize as a New York-based Spectrum user that maybe not the best experience.
Yeah, definitely. There's a reason why they were paradised by South Park. That's how bad they are.
Yeah.
But before Spectrum cuts off my internet for talking smack about them in the middle of the show, so let's talk a little bit about exactly what happened. So as you guys probably know, last Saturday the Toros went up to Weidner Field to take on Colorado Springs Switchbacks. The outcome was bleak at best. We had obviously the historical context of the fact that Colorado Springs Switchbacks came to HEB Park and completely demolished the Toros in their own field. The final score, if I'm not mistaken, was 5-2 in that matchup. Now, to me, and Jacob can talk about it a little bit more, but to me, it seemed like the scoreline was actually deceiving of what actually happened on the field. I felt like maybe, yes, Colorado was the better team overall in that particular game, but not a 5-2 huge difference what happened on the field. Jacob, do you agree with that, or what were your thoughts in that particular game?
Yeah, the first time that RGV FC faced Colorado Springs this year at home, RGV FC looked really good. I think they looked better in that first half, in my opinion, where they had that momentum. They tried to go for goals, but of course, we all know you're going for goals to try to catch back up, and you're behind in a game, you're going to leave a lot of space for the opposition to take advantage. And Colorado Springs did a good job of taking advantage of that. So yes, RGVFC, the score was a little bit more deceiving than it looked on the pitch, but oh well, that was of course that first game, and RGVFC had to move on from that matchup and just try and forget about it and go on, I believe, the road for a couple of matches after that one. So yeah, it was deceiving, but of course, I believe that was also at the time that Tyler Derrick was not starting on goal due to an injury. So that also played a factor.
Do you agree with our sentiments there, John?
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head when you sort of have to play out on the front foot against Colorado Springs. That's when they're best enabled to catch you out. This is a team that loves to play on the counterattack, loves to launch a long ball over a side that's in their opposition half and activate your Beckfords, your Ingalinas, that sort of player. So yeah, that's exactly how I would have described what happened there.
Now, fast forward now to this particular game against Colorado Springs Switchbacks, but this time it was up in the altitude. at Colorado Springs Switchbacks home turf. And one of the things that Wilmer Cabrera did mention after the game against Loudoun United was they needed to improve defensively to kind of take care of the fact of how fast the attackers for Colorado Springs Switchbacks really are. That was something that killed RGV FC in the match at HCB Park. Now, you look at the starting lineup, and I'll go ahead and put it up on the screen right over here. And what piqued my interest was, number one, the exclusion of Rodrigo Lopez in the midfield in favor of Flores, and we're back to using the line of five. You know, for a couple of games, the Toros were playing in a line of four with Pimentel, Adrian Dispe, Adrian Vera, and Carter Manley. Now it looked more like they were using a line of five with obviously Tyler Derrick was on goal. Then you had Juan Carlos Azocar, which surprised me, and it's one of the biggest question marks that I had in this starting 11. The having Juan Carlos Azocar as a right wing back rather than a winger, where or a striker, as his more natural positions really are. And then next to him, you have Carter Manley kind of playing as a center back. Then Adrian Dispe and Eric Pimentel, the other two center backs, and then Adrian Vera in his not his natural position, since he is more of a midfielder, but I felt like it's the position that kind of helps his with his qualities. It gives him the freedom to kind of go up and help out on the attack as that wing back. Then up in the midfield, you have one holding center midfielder with James Murphy, which he has been playing for the last couple of games and honestly hasn't done that bad. In front of him, you've got the two newcomers for RGVFC with Flores and Emilio Icaza as the more attacking-oriented midfielders. And then up in front with two players with Christian Sorto and Elvis Amo. Jacob, did this particular lineup surprise you?
I don't think it really surprised me, due to the fact that, well, RGVFC, yeah, they had to change something for sure. You talk about playing at home to a draw against Loudoun United the week before that, and you're still playing on a line of four and things like that, and you're not going to necessarily work. You've already played against Colorado Springs once before, and that lineup did not work, so you got to change it back against a team that, well, destroyed you, kind of, in the sense that they were able to counterattack. So definitely, it didn't necessarily surprise me. RGVFC still have that much depth. It was good to see a little bit of balance. You need to utilize Elvis Amo as much as possible. And of course, yes, Juan Carlos Azocar sometimes isn't the best player to be on the pitch, but at that point, he still has shown his promise on the field to where he can still have some potential.
God, I want to get your thoughts on this particular lineup. Did you feel like maybe this was the best lineup that Wilmer Cabrera could have had in order to kind of counteract the offense that was Colorado Springs?
Yeah, I think just starting with the formation and the choice to go with the back three, back five setup, it's something that you really have to do against Colorado Springs. They play in that 4-3-3 system where you've got Haji Berry at the middle of things, and you really see a focus on that attacking band. They use their wingers really effectively. And so by inserting that extra center back into your defensive line, you're able to be a bit more flexible to go chase those players when they get the ball in transition. And so by switching from the back four that RGV ran out with last time against Colorado Springs, there was just that extra layer of protection against the Colorado Springs approach. I liked the pick with Azocar at right back. he's someone who is capable enough on the defensive side of things. Like, he's not much more than a warm body, but given the back three and you have three center backs already, you don't need a ton of that. But he really
Mhm.
can give you a lot of energy getting up and down the wing from an attacking standpoint. He attempted 6 crosses in this game, which
Yeah.
sort of just shows the impact he had. Again, driving transition, getting into the final third a bit on his own. So I thought, in terms of some of those personnel and tactical choices from the outset, they were pretty wise.
So one of the most things that kind of caught my eye off of this particular match is I felt that this game pretty much went on as to how many people thought it was going to be, in the fact that Colorado Springs would have the kind of the initiative to go out on the attack. They had some of the most clearer chances on goal in this particular match. So if we look into the statistics of this particular match, I was looking, I think, at halftime. Let me go ahead and show you the particular graphic. So at halftime, they posted that Colorado Springs had 6 shots, 3 of those on target, whereas the Toros were at 3 shots and only 1 of those were on target. So that was, I guess you could say, it was one of those things where it even looked like RGV was being held on into its own side of the field. Defensively, they were able to pretty much limit the clear opportunities that maybe Colorado Springs are used to, especially when it comes to long spaces, when it comes to, taking advantage of the explosiveness and the speed of their wingers like the Shane Beckford, to be able to make some danger off of it. And I think the biggest surprise for me, and I want to hear your analysis, John, is how the Toros were able to get Haji Berry, the most dangerous, the leading goal scorer of the USL Championship, took him out of the equation. 0 shots on target. Obviously, out of 8 duels that he had, he only won 2 of them. He lost 6 of them. So those aren't great numbers that we were used to seeing out of Haji Berry. But John, how did the Toros make that happen?
So I think the first element of it was the system that they were playing and the tactics they were pursuing just in general against Colorado Springs. And the first element of that was sort of giving up on the possession battle to a certain extent, letting Colorado Springs have the ball a bit more than they're used to, not pressing as high. And in doing so, they were able to sit back pretty comfortably in that back 3 setup and limit them in transition.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a response to that, Barry really wasn't able to find space in a way in those kind of open areas of the field that he usually does. So what did he do? How did he respond to that? He tended to drop deeper. He would drift wide a lot more than you typically see from him. And he was able to pick up the ball in those sorts of areas. But that's when you would see the wing backs and the center backs either track him there. And really the principle was to just close him down as hard as possible, as quickly as possible. He's a player who's really excellent on the ball, and he's an underrated passer as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so in this almost man marking-ish approach, they were really able to limit what he was doing. And again, it's that flexibility of having the extra man in your defense with the back 5 system that allows you to go for that. So I think the back 5 and the hard closing that it enabled while limiting his space in transition was really the strategy that limited him in this game.
So I'm looking at the video that you sent, and right off the bat in the first play that is in your compilation. So it's barely the 2nd minute, and you see a kind of like a bad pass given to Haji Berry that Haji Berry tries to go after it, but right off the bat, you see James Murphy and Emilio Icaza, and close by him, you also have Flores, just like near the vicinity where Haji Berry is. In that particular play, it's James Murphy that comes away with the ball. And then right a couple of minutes later, there's another play where you see he's got a dual man, like two players marking him. So you see that particular double play on him, and also like you mentioned, he's outside his box. He is, he's dropping back in order to try to get that ball. I think there was a couple of plays as well where he would receive the ball with his back towards the goal, and then on there in that play you see Ikaza and Carter Manley like right up to him. Like as soon as he received the ball with his back towards the goal, there was two players on him that didn't allow him to be comfortable enough to move that ball around.
Yeah, exactly. So when he's in the box, you're putting two center backs on him because you have that flexibility. And then when he drops deeper, you're able to really engage in a way with those central midfielders, with the wing backs in certain instances, and just put a lot of pressure on him, make it hard for him to do anything of value.
Yeah, and so yeah, it's not, and then not only was it the center backs doing the work. You see this one where Adrian Duspe clears the ball away, but the midfielders, all of the midfielders, James Murphy, Ikaza, and Flores, they put their overalls on to make him drop back even further than he's comfortable. And now on here, you posted a graphic. It's a comparison between his game against Charlotte Independence and the game against RGV. What can we make out of this graphic?
So I think there are two key trends, really. First of all, is just in general, he was able to find a lot less touches in the game against RGV. So, I mean, you're limiting what he can do on a sheer number of opportunities basis in that regard. Mm-hmm. But I think second is the number of touches in dangerous areas in the box, where I think he did have a tendency to drift wide in both matches. That's something that is a real hallmark of his game. But it was the second component of it where he can play a 1-2 and get into the box. He's finding the end of crosses that RGV did a fantastic job of preventing.
And so I can see right here, he doesn't have as many touches compared to against Charlotte in week 18. Most of his touches, even then, they're way deep and way out wide. And obviously you don't see a lot of him off of the right side in orientation of the where Colorado Springs is attacking. And the touches that he does make inside the box, he has to pass the ball. He had to pass the ball back, trying to find somebody else that was open, which leads me to believe that even when he was able to get his way into the 18-yard box, there was somebody there, a defender like Carter Manley or Adrian Duspe, to put the pressure on him and him not, forcing himself to try to distribute the ball to somebody else because he just didn't have the space to not even make any shots. And that's the most surprising aspect of it. And I feel like maybe other teams in the USL should probably take some notes. While we do know that RGV did not win this game, but I felt like overall, this is a chalkboard theory on how you can stop Haji Berry from the rest of the season. And I think Wilmer Cabrera, in this aspect, the way he prepared this match, I think he did a fantastic job defensively. Offensively, it's still kind of lacking, at least in my point of view. But I do think that at least defensively, it's been a lot better, a lot more organized than we have seen from this team in the last couple of weeks. Do you agree, Jacob?
Easily. I mean, the offensive side, of course, we can all see RGV FC still putting about one goal or less than a goal a game. Of course, they should have been able to score 3 against Loudoun United the past week. And so that, or 2 weeks ago, I should say, but that in itself is frustrating. Then you go over to Colorado, are able to score a goal. Yes, of course, the defense can only do so much, but the name of the game is score more goals than the other team. So the offense still needs to do a better job of putting more goals or more shots on target. And just basically having a higher opportunity or a higher percentage of shots being saved by a keeper or something, on that side. For sure on the defensive side, they've gotten more organized. I like what we're seeing, but of course, you have to play for the full 90 minutes. You can't just play for the full 60. And so that's where, of course, tired legs come into play. And the offense, of course, needs to just, like I said, I think they just need to do a better job. The defense is doing okay, still can do better, of course, like always, but they're on that right track.
So, and then at the end of the first half, you see Oxford get a red card. And it all starts because of a bad pass that was given to him by one of his teammates in the middle of the field. All of Colorado was kind of high up on the pitch. The defensive line was right pretty much at the midfield line. A bad giveaway by Colorado, which Elvis Amo was able to intercept. And he was it was pretty much a clear shot all the way towards the keeper. But Oxford, in his intent to stop the play, trips up Elvis Amo, and pretty much a red card was given to him, which meant that Colorado Springs would be playing the second half down a player. And a lot of people would assume that that the fact that the Toros would have such an advantage, it would translate into an easier ability for the Toros to attack and take advantage of it to score some goals on Colorado Springs Switchbacks. But in practice, it just wasn't the case. What can you tell us about that, John? Because it just I think in the fans' point of view, it kind of goes against the logic of like having more players and somehow Colorado was still able to dominate possession and opportunities on goal for Colorado.
Yeah, I think certainly you're right that in terms of that possession battle, they kept it up, and it was because of the substitutions they made kept the base of their defense in midfield and a pretty similar setup. And RGV was more than content to let them sort of keep the ball in that mid-block area where, again, they're not able to strike out in transition in a way that they might prefer. But I think that their good chances were still fairly limited. They did, at the beginning of the half especially, come up with a couple of nice opportunities that I sort of pinpointed their use of pressure in the midfield, where they turned over RGV. There was a little bit of sloppiness in terms of the passing on RGV's end, and they were able to break out, put in crosses, and really pin back the Toros in a way that was different than the first half. But overall, I think that they were still fairly impotent, and I think that RGV did a pretty good job defending.
And I noticed that as well. I felt that the Toros, as soon as they would grab the ball, when they would recover the ball or they had a goal kick or something like that, and they had possession of it, you had a couple of players from Colorado right away coming in and to create some pressure, which forced turn giveaways within their own side of the field. Or at times you would see where they would just kind of launch the ball towards the other side, and hopefully Elvis Amo would be able to get to it and kind of retain the ball until help got on their way. But more often than not, you saw them, losing the ball really, really easily. And and I think you mentioned, the defensively, the Toros were able to hold on really, really well, not get them 100% comfortable. But it's just one of those things, and it's not the first time we talk about it during the season, how, yes, the Toros, when they are the ones that exert the pressure, it can be very effective, especially in the beginning of the season. The Toros would use that high pressure system to cause havoc in the opposing team. But when it's the opposing team that is the high pressure, we saw it against Oklahoma City, for example. When the other team exerts a high pressure on the Toros, it's almost like they forget, the basics of passing. It's like they see the pressure coming in to them, and they're just trying to get the ball away to try to not to lose the ball. But in the end, they end up, giving away that ball because of that desperation of trying to get that high pressure off of them. And it's something that the Toros, I haven't seen any improvement in how to counteract that high pressure effectively. Jacob or John, whoever.
Yeah, but was one of those situations definitely where just RGV FC weren't necessarily a. Well, what I want to say actually is we've seen that time and time again. RGV FC not down a player, but they have another team down a player. What do? They allow Colorado to basically get into their own space or anybody that basically plays against them. So, and that's very frustrating that RGV can't take advantage of a 10-man down. But my philosophy, in my opinion, has always been, well, that's the way that it's supposed to be. Even though there's more space, you're going to see a tighter game from the opposing teams, not allowing you to take advantage. Yes, RGVFC were able to score a goal in the 73rd minute or about 76th minute, but of course, that only came later when they could have potentially had a couple of more opportunities earlier on in that second half.
So what happened, John, in that play leading up to the goal? What went wrong for Colorado that gave the Toros that opening to be able to score?
I think that's tough to pinpoint up to a certain extent. I think generally when you think about the success that RGV has had offensively this season, a lot of it has been founded on those sorts of pressure opportunities, things where you can get midfielders like Rodrigo involved. In this case, it was sort of just being able to get out in a sort of transition opportunity. Colorado Springs tended to have the ball higher up the pitch, and so forcing them to track back, forcing the defense to get organized was a challenge for them.
Mm-hmm.
And on that specific play, you saw RGV really funneled the ball into the half space area where you had a lot of the flexibility. They're moving forward, and I think the movement was a big thing, especially on this play. It's an area that I've criticized RGV for in recent weeks, where Samo obviously has been excellent for a lot of the season, but I think a lot of the other attackers have been somewhat lacking in what they've been able to do.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, I mean, you saw, I can't remember which player it was, sort of striking out to the right wing to draw a center back out of position. You saw that central movement from Frank Lopez, and it just opened up the field for them in a way that you don't always see from this side.
And so I'm looking at this play right now, and Ikaza is the one that dribbles the ball from behind his, from behind the midfield line. And, you see that, and you bring up a good point. So first of all, Mahoney tries to go up against Emilio Ikaza, but he comes up to him in a manner where he was unbalanced. And when Ikaza changes direction, there was no way he could react. In fact, if you notice the replay, Mahoney has to take the long way around, turning in a counterclockwise direction to get back into the play, which gave plenty of opportunity for Emilio Ikaza to advance. And then you did mention as well, Samo makes that run towards the right side of the field, and that pretty much took kind of the attention away from. I'm trying to remember who that center back is, but that left him out of the play, and then you see Anderson, who's the one who's supposed to be guarding Frank Lopez. He ends up being a little bit of a disadvantage in that through ball, and you just got to give credit to Frank in the ability to, even when the keeper's coming up to kind of close down that space. He was able to find that space in between Melvin's legs to score that goal. And I'm not going to lie, it has been the goal that I have yelled at the loudest this season because it felt like, okay, finally, this is like the light at the end of the tunnel. This is going to be the end of their 6. At that point, it was still 6 games of an what's the game? What's the word I'm looking for? Without winning,
Yeah.
They were on a 6-game
Winless.
winless streak. There we go. That's the word I'm looking for. Apparently, I can't English today. But yes, a 6-game winless streak, and to go up to Colorado Springs, limit their most dangerous players' opportunities. Find a goal, even though offensively it wasn't their best game, but still be able to find a goal in the 80th minute. It brought a lot of hope. But then it all went down at the very end. Now, I do want to mention this, Jacob. I want to bring you this question. If you were Wilmer Cabrera, what would you have done to try to maintain the lead? Considering you're in altitude and you're going up against the most dangerous offense in the USL Championship, what would you have done?
Well, I mean, it's tough because, again, I'm not head coach, or I'm not manager, but it's that same deal of, do you park the bus in that situation? Do you try to go for that counter? Do you still try to attack? You brought up great points, Edson. They are on the road. It is altitude. They are playing against a very, very high-powering offense that one of the players used to play for RGV FC back in the Jerson Echeverry era of RGV FC. But besides that, yeah, it's tough. I think, I would have parked the bus. You're up 1-0. You have, at that point, it was, they scored the 76th, so you know that you're going to get at least 1 minute there of added time. With all the other commotion that happened, it would probably be about 3 to 4. They ended up getting 4. But so, you're going to have about 14 more minutes left, given when it comes to 80 minutes. So it was definitely tough. I think you park the bus. I think Wilmer Cabrera does the correct thing in not trying to attack too much, because it's going to happen. You might try to get some possession though, but it's still tough to do that.
So this is what actually happened. 4 minutes after Frank Lopez scores the goal, Wilmer Cabrera decides to bring in Juan David Cabezas and Rodrigo Lopez for Christian Sorto and Emilio Icaza. I can agree with those substitutions and make the more logical sense. You bring in Juan David Cabezas to help out James Murphy in the central defensive midfielder. So instead of playing with one CDM, you're now playing with 2, Juan David Cabezas and James Murphy, to try to help kind of contain that offense by Colorado Springs Switchbacks. Where I wholeheartedly disagree, and hopefully John can kind of give his unbiased thoughts on what I'm about to say. Where I wholeheartedly disagreed, and it wasn't the fact of him trying to park the bus. I agree with what Jacob said. I think the most logical decision was to park the bus. But bringing in Camden Riley, look, I can even understand Elvis Amo getting sacrificed to bring in another defender. But Camden Riley? Like, really? Like, this is a player that has been responsible for a lot of goals in the last couple of games against El Paso, against Oklahoma City Energy. And and there are some more games where, his lack of attention, the mistakes that he's made, the fact that he's not aware of his surroundings, leaving people open, when he goes up against another attacker, he goes in there unbalanced in a way where, once he's beat, it takes him a while for him to recover, and that gives him enough time to get the cross, etc., which is what happened against OKC Energy. To me, and I said it yesterday for the striker Tejas, when you're bringing in a player in the last couple of minutes to park the bus, to hold out for one result, for a winning result, a 1-0 lead, You got to bring in a player that is, is going to be concentrated, is going to have to play almost, if not play, a perfect game in the 2-3 minutes that he's going to be on the pitch. A player that is going to be, I guess you can say, that has been doing good defensively, clearances, interceptions, etc., duels won, etc., etc., etc. Camden Riley isn't him. I mean, who else? But question is, who else can you put in? Diego Rocha? Maybe. We haven't seen him at all this season. But he's a player that whenever he played last season, he did decently. He wasn't afraid to get his feet dirty, trying to get maybe a yellow card, trying to force a foul, at least to stop a play. Maybe, his lack of experience could kind of hurt him in this kind of situations. But at least, at least he kind of has that background of, okay, he can play decently. On the bench defensively, you brought in Grant Robinson, for Vera, so he was in already. The only people that were left were Colin Miller and John Henry Sanchez. So no Edwin Cuero, who else? No other defenders were there. It's like I said, Grant Robinson, which you had already brought him in the 50-some minute, and Camden Riley. But if it were up to me, I don't know, you got to have somebody better to rely on than Camden Riley. And I hate, even though I do it all the time, but I honestly hate, believe it or not, to pinpoint players directly. But honestly, the performances that Camden Riley has had in the last couple of games, whether he's a starter or he comes in off the bench, have left a lot to be desired.
I would push back. I definitely think there's a lot of validity to what you're saying, but I think on the play itself that really determined the draw, which is that goal that they gave up at the tail end of this match, I don't think he can be the one that you blame necessarily. Sure, he didn't track his man in a way that was needed, but there are 4 or 5 guys in the box who could have stepped up and made a clearance. The run from Haji Berry at the top of the box, in fact, cleared up so much space and you have to give him credit for that with the cleverness. On the left wing, you had the whole issue with, I believe, Adrian Vera stepping to Beckford and allowing that overlapping run that leads to the assist. It was not a comedy of errors, but just a lot of things going wrong where I think there's certainly a lot to be said for Cameron Riley being a bit of a disappointment as of late, but it was a lot of miscommunication. And I think a lot of the fact that you've brought on 3 players in the last 5 minutes and changed your system, where suddenly that defensive strategy that had worked so well for the first 90 minutes of this match was suddenly you have a lower level of familiarity. You're working with a little bit of a different setup. Meanwhile, Colorado Springs is pushing up Mahoney, who had played as a center back the whole half. So just a lot of factors contributing to ultimately lead to the disappointing outcome there.
So I'm looking at the play, the video replay. Bring up 2 points. Number one, you mentioned that defender that allowed Shane Beckford to turn around. Eric Pimentel, another player that I've kind of mentioned throughout the season. Gave him the space, but he also, I think there's also credit.
Look at the left wing back there who.
Grant Robinson.
Grant Robinson, right. He just takes this subtle step up when he thinks that Beckford might get loose. He's got to trust in his teammate, I guess, because you have that fullback bearing down he's really stuck between a rock and a hard place there, but it's ultimately the wrong play for him.
Yeah, so I see on there, it's actually Pimentel that you mentioned that kind of takes that step up, and he's a player that allows him to kind of turn around. But you also see that when Shane Beckford, receives the ball, James Murphy is there as well, kind of keeping watch, kind of making sure that, but however, he leaves a wide open space between himself and Grant Robinson, who's kind of watching freely. And so Shane Beckford turns around And I guess you bring up a good point now. I advance the play, and I see Eric Pimentel, instead of going up towards Beckford where he's going as he's stepping back, he doesn't follow him because he thinks that Juan Carlos Azócar is going to drop back and help him defend. Juan Carlos Azócar doesn't. Eric Pimentel doesn't move up to close down the space. That gives Beckford the space necessary for him to turn around, sees that wide open space in between James Murphy and Grant Robinson, and just threads that ball in between the two players towards Mahoney. Got it. By the way, beautiful run by Mahoney, and the fact that he gets that across on the first touch, it's just like I don't think the coach could have asked for anything better than that out of Mahoney, But I'm seeing the play, and I'm looking at where. Wait, who'd you say? Wait, was it no? Because Mahoney was the one that scored. The assister was Anderson. Yeah, the assister was Anderson who got the cross in. But you see Mahoney at the top of the box, and it seemed like Mahoney takes like 4 steps before Camden Riley reacts and starts running behind him, and that gives the opportunity for him to kind of go run towards the goal, without a lot of pressure off of him. But yeah, and I also can agree with you on the fact of how Haji Berry indirectly kind of affects that play in trying to lure.
Right. Watch how Manley and Juan Cabezas react on that play. They track. Yeah. They could cut off. Yes, Riley is very slow to try to follow Mahoney, but he's sort of relying on one of those two to cut in front, cut out any pass that happens. Instead, both of them are tracking that run that Berry makes across the top.
Yeah.
Suddenly, nothing but open space. It's just a lot of blame to go around on this play.
It is. So Camden, I'm sorry because but yeah, I think everybody made mistakes when they shouldn't have, and that at the end would cause it. Another thing to notice, because you mentioned Carter Manley. Carter Manley was the one that originally was marking Mahoney, right? And then there's another player. Was it Haji Berry? No. Let me see who that player was from. No, it was Haji Berry. Haji Berry kind of comes in, floats in from 3/4 of the way of the field. He runs towards where Mahoney and Manley are situated. He walks right in front of them. Carter Manley is like, okay, let me go guard Haji Berry. Camden Riley goes in, and he pretty much positions himself on the back of Mahoney. And so all of that, I felt that threw everything out of proportion. Camden Riley wasn't expecting Mahoney to make that run. When he finally reacted, it was a little bit too late. But it's interesting how, in the end, Haji Berry didn't have any direct influence when it comes to like shot or him scoring a goal or getting an assist like he usually does. But indirectly, in the way he positioned himself on the field, that was I think the biggest difference that threw the defensive line out of whack. I don't know if you agree with that, Jacob and John, upon hearing this.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Everything that definitely could go wrong in that last moment did. And I mean, both of y'all bring up great points, and it's frustrating to have a new defensive back line basically in the last 5 minutes for that goal to basically happen. So yeah, no, I just have to agree with you, Edson, and one of those situations where it's frustrating to still talk about that last minute goals are happening.
Anything you want to add, John?
I'm just in full agreement with both of you here.
And it's interesting because I didn't notice that, honestly, when I was watching the game. I didn't notice all those off the ball movements that Haji Berry made. And when you brought it up and I looked back on the replay, it just clicked on me like how correct you are in that analysis, how just that him drifting on the top of the box changed everything for the defensive line, and that it wasn't really 100% Camden Riley's fault. You see that lack of communication between Pimentel and Juan Carlos Azocar. And honestly, like if you don't really know where to look at when you're watching these plays, you kind of go with what the easiest thing is. Oh, blame whoever was marking the goal scorer. But all of these different little details like completely went whoosh over my head, watching the play. But this is why someone like John on Twitter, on social media, on other podcasts, this is why having people as dedicated to the game as John, whether it's USL or MLS, et cetera, it's very important to understand, the intricacies of how complex a soccer game truly is by nature.
Appreciate that. I mean, I think it's just something interesting to watch where there's so much complexity that goes into these things, and it makes you appreciate the stuff that someone like a Haji Berry is able to do.
So now looking forward to the match against, once again, Colorado. We do realize that they are playing today at home once again against El Paso Locomotive. But what can you expect from this game on Saturday against the Toros against Colorado, but this time at HEB Park? Do you expect along the same lines with a very defensive-minded RGV FC? Considering the fact, if we want to go back into the game where we lost 5-1, I asked Wilmer Cabrera in post-game press conferences, what he thought could have been different in a way to kind of counteract the speed, because it felt like the Toros they knew how difficult it was for them to kind of react to the speed of the wingers, but they just weren't able to kind of adapt and change their tactic in order to counteract that. And this is why all the 5 goals were scored. And he mentioned one of the things is he said, I definitely, one of the things that I think I could have done was be a little bit more defensive minded to try to close down the spaces and not give them the space to run in front of the goal. And he said, but we're playing at home, and for me, it's like we want to give the fans, something, entertaining to go out and have the initiative to go out and attack, and not just stay behind it and park the bus. I'm paraphrasing, but that was pretty much the idea of what Wilmer Cabrera mentioned. He felt like, yeah, I could have parked the bus, I could have played more defensively, but I felt it would have been a disservice to the fans that were here at the stadium. What are your thoughts on that particular statement by Wilmer?
I really like the intention behind it, but I think at the end of the day, a win is a win, and whatever tactic you can have to get the full 3 points, even if that is a little bit of the bus parking defensive play, is the most important thing at the end of the day. Looking forward to the upcoming match, I think the big challenge is that Galena for Colorado Springs looks to be healthy and available for selection tonight. So I'd imagine he will start in the weekend's match. And he, to me, is almost as impactful as Barry for this side. He's absolutely dynamite in those transition opportunities. So I think that if you're RGV, you probably take a similar approach to the one you played in this match. It's hard to game plan for, because if a team is well organized and stout in their own half, they're hard to break down. And I think that's been a hallmark of RGV this season, even when the offense has been a little bit less sharp.
Jacob?
I definitely have to agree there. I'm looking at the lineup right now they had for the game against El Paso. And of course, it's Anderson, Edwards, Mahoney, Haji,
Echevarria?
Yeah, him. Makangala,
Argueta?
Argueta, Barry, and Amang, as well as Beckford. One of the things that I want to mention is if if SE can stay, basically, if he gets a yellow card, he'll be gone for the next match due to yellow card accumulation, is what it looks like according to.
Well, he does have a
Google.
yellow. He does have a yellow at this moment.
Well,
Chavarria?
then yeah, there you go. He's got a yellow now. Then yeah, he'll be obviously suspended. So that's one of the things. It's going to be difficult for RGV FC. I think they come back with the same game plan that they had, because that worked. It worked. Of course, there's things that they definitely need to improve on against Colorado Springs, but they can definitely get those 3 points if they're able to shut down, just like they did with Haji and almost Barry for a couple of times. Of course, Barry and Haji will find a way to get out in the open and try to attack, just like Beckford will be a part of it. But RGVFC, they've got this team on the ropes to where they can definitely beat them. And Wilmer Cabrera has to park the bus. He has to be that coach. Yes, you're playing at home, but get the 3 points. You're on a 7-game losing streak, basically, or a 7-game winless streak. So yes, RGVFC have gotten points against this team, but they need a win, or else, well, you're looking at not making the playoffs when you had such a great first half of the freaking season, and that's going to be worse than if we just did not have any expectations after the first couple of months where RGVFC lost more than they were able to win.
So just a quick reminder, guys, we are 5th in the Western Conference Mountain Division. We are a point behind Austin Bold, 6 points 5 points technically, not including today's match that's still currently going on between El Paso and Colorado, which is 0-0. But we're technically 5 points behind the Switchbacks, 5 points behind San Antonio FC, and 15 points behind El Paso. But take it step by step. We're 1 point away from Austin Bold, which is 4th place, the last playoff spot for the Mountain Division. There's still a lot of USL Championship to go on, but the Toros really need to leave this winless streak behind, because Austin, Colorado, they're starting to get into their groove. San Antonio, ni se diga, San Antonio's kind of been on the groove for a while as well, to the fact that they're now in 2nd place, but they really have to get their act together and start winning points, especially at home. Because like we mentioned, and Jacob mentioned right now, I think it's going to hurt the fans a lot more, the fact that we had the team to make it to playoffs. We were in playoff spots for so long in this 2021 season, and then to lose it in the second half of the season, not being able to win at home, it's gonna be painful. You realize it's still a building phase for this team, but I think that we do have the talent, and we can't complain. We can't say, oh, we don't have the depth. Like we had, like that could have been an excuse last couple of years. We don't. We have players to spare in multiple positions, so that if somebody is not doing well, somebody else can come in and replace them and try to look for something different. So we have the talent, we have the depth. I don't know what's happening, with the Toros, and how they went from being one of the toughest teams to face in the beginning of the season to now it's like even Loudoun United, the worst team in the USL Championship, managed to get a point out of HEB Park. But what has been the key to that, John? Why is it that, I talked to Rodrigo Lopez for the Striker Texas, and he mentioned that he felt that other teams were now taking the Toros a lot more seriously than they were probably before the season began. They were, the team was getting studied a lot more by the opposition, which probably means with the fact that why other teams have been playing them better in the middle of the season and where we're at right now. But as someone who analyzes the whole USL, what do you think has happened to the Toros?
Yeah, just talking on that point specifically, I think this was a team that came out with a lot of new players who hadn't been with each other before. And so if you're playing them for the first time, you're not really sure what style they're going to take, what runs they're going to be making. Suddenly you get to these second, third matchups with the Toros, and you're a bit more familiar with what's going on. And I think Cabrera has been a little bit slow to adjust and react. And so when you're seeing these changes to a back five, I think that's the counter play that you need to be seeing from this RGV side. For me, I think they've really solidified well defensively and maintained that high level of play. But I think there needs to be more variation in the offense, more movement, more ingenuity. So when you see someone like a Frank Lopez come in, make those smart runs, find the back of the net, I think that's an important change that's being made. But I think in general, there needs to be a little bit better connection between the midfield and the defense in terms of how you're building up. And there needs to be just more movement in general, more runs from the midfield into the attacking third when you have those chances, just to sort of add some sort of flow and fluidity to a team that's really slowed down and gotten a little bit stale.
Yeah, and I mentioned last week after the game against Loudon that Emilio Casa was that difference. He was one of those players where he had the initiative to try to run in between the defensive line and try to get that through ball. Often at times he kind of mistimed it, and so he was caught off sides. But you saw that intention for him to bring in something different into the attack, to bring in that surprise. Instead of it just being, oh, take it out towards the wings and try to cross it towards the Mo or to whoever's inside. Which, for starters, they haven't been great with crossing, but as you mentioned, they around the average for the USL. So it's kind of normal. But in the end of the day, like you mentioned, I do feel sometimes that I think in the beginning it felt a lot more varied, where they tried different ways to attack. But then as the season went on, they kind of fell into this monotonous way of trying to attack, trying to see what Juan Carlos Azócar can do, or try to see if we can get it through ball over to Elvis Amo and see what he can do to it. So, but Emilio Casa, I think, is a step in the right direction. Frank Lopez as well. I think as he gets more minutes, we might see something different. Those two players, I think, are going to be the key to kind of reverting this situation. Is it going to be enough? I think so. Like I said, there's still a long way to go. There's still 2 months left of USL Championship, and how close the Mountain Division is. You get into a good streak, and then that can put you in a situation where you're probably back to third or even second place in the Mountain Division. But it all starts with the players. So I think I definitely do agree with your analysis, John. Jacob, your thoughts before we wrap up for today?
Yeah, no, RGVFC need a win. It starts off with, it can start up. Yeah, win can spark this team big time, and the players will get some confidence back, especially, yes, of course, they're definitely shot. Their confidence is a little bit shot, to be exact, due to the fact that, well, they can't get back on that winning streak. They came very close last week, but of course, they fell in the end 1-1, which also felt like a loss because of how late the goal happened. It's going to be a very difficult matchup this Saturday. Hopefully they can get a win, but hey, guess what? In the end, a point is good against good teams that are ahead of you. So it won't be the worst thing in the world if RGVFC can get a point this upcoming weekend. The following weekend, though, they are back at home against Atlanta United DOS. And I think that's a game where you definitely need a victory due to the fact that, well, it is an MLS 2 team. And if we know, besides Red Bulls, those organizations aren't the best. Or even back then, the Vancouver Whitecaps, too, were not the best teams either for MLS 2 teams. So definitely, it won't be the worst thing in the world to get a point this weekend. Only 1 point, but it definitely won't help, or it definitely will be the best thing if RGVFC can get 3 points, and it all starts with sparking of one player to get everybody back in on the philosophy of the team.
At least make it a good birthday present for me, RGV, if you can get a win on September 25th against Atlanta United too. John, any final thoughts before we sign off?
I would just say that I think it's going to be a tough road in the Mountain Division, given how a team like San Antonio and Austin are playing. But this is a talented side. They showed it at the beginning of the year, and if I were a fan, I would be bullish on the chances.
All right. So before we go, we usually do our predictions. Jacob, what is your prediction for Saturday?
Prediction for Saturday, I think it's going to be a lot closer. I don't think it's going to be as many goals as we saw last time out. I think it's going to be closer, and I still think it's going to be a draw this time, 2-2. And yeah, both teams will tie, but I think it's going to be very similar.
All right, John, you're not exempt from this. What's your prediction?
I think we see maybe an early goal from Colorado Springs. They'll catch somebody out on the counter. And I think it'll be tough from RGV from there. I'll go 2-1 Colorado Springs.
2-1 Colorado Springs. I'm gonna go. I said it was going to be a draw yesterday, and I'm sticking by that. And I think it's gonna be another 1-1 draw at HV Park. Definitely not the result that the Toros need to get back in track to be in the playoff positions. But at least 1 point is better than nothing. But if we can see some more improvements, even if the scoreline doesn't reflect it, but if we can see more improvements in other areas of the pitch, we saw some improvements defensively for 90 minutes where it was a 94-minute game. But that's neither here nor there. But we appreciate the improvements that they're building up on as the end of this season approaches. I think I can settle with that for now. But in the short term, yeah, the Toros need to back up their improvements with a positive score line. So I'm going to go with a 1-1 prediction. So Mike says 2-1 RGV FC win as his prediction. So Jacob, bold prediction.
Bold prediction. I think you're going to see a 10 versus 10 game. Yes, both players or both teams will have at least one player get a red card. We looked at Colorado Springs, their lineup, and my prediction for who's going to get that red card from Colorado Springs. Well, it's going to be I'm forgetting his name. James Murphy is going to get a red card for RGVFC. This is going to happen simultaneously, by the way. It's going to be one of those little pushing and shoving matches, and both of them are going to get called out for it. And then, yeah, we'll go with Barry's going to get that red card as well. So that is that prediction, and it's going to be a 5-5 final.
John, your bold prediction.
No goals, no assists for Barry again. I say they shut him down.
Wow. I think that the fact that if they repeat that performance to limit Haji Berry, that is pretty bold. But any final score bold prediction to go along with it?
I think if it goes one direction versus the other, then we might see a Machine Galena hat trick where RGV gets in a little bit of trouble.
Oof. My bold prediction, 3-0 RGV, and Galena throws a ball towards the ball boy, and he gets another red card. That's my bold prediction right there. Harry says 3-3 draw, regular prediction, bold prediction 5-0 to RGV. Mike says 4-2 RGV FC, bold prediction. And Harry says Switchbacks lead the league with 6 red cards. So he says to add to Jacob's point, Switchbacks do hold the lead in the league with 6 red cards. So it could be possible, Jacob. Thank you, Harry, for bringing that up. But guys, that's going to be pretty much it for this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in to talk a little bit about the Toros versus the Colorado Springs Switchbacks. We want to thank John of USL Tactics for coming on the show to enlighten us with his knowledge of soccer. within the Toros, not only about the game, but also, the future, the rest of the season for RGV FC Toros. John, where can they find you at? Where can they find your works?
Yeah, at USL Tactics on Twitter, always a great place. From there, you can find the link. I've got a website going now just as a hub for some of the content I'm putting out. So it'll have the latest video I do every week for the USL show. It has some of the tweets, and it has player stats that are searchable, as well as a sort of guide to every team's tactics. So be sure to check that out.
Yeah, and his analysis is pretty great, guys. Like, you guys check out his videos that he tweets out, and he goes into depth with the little chalkboard and on the video exactly what you need to look at. He explains real well, what makes this particular play so important to the organization. I know you did I know you did one today or yesterday of Phoenix Rising, where you mentioned that at times even Phoenix Rising ends up being a little bit very disorganized, and you bring up valid points on screen as to why the Phoenix Rising have kind of been uncharacteristically disorganized when it comes to their attacks. So guys, be sure to give them a follow. You guys will not regret it. And of course, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Down in the RGV. So you guys can be notified whenever we do go live or we post any content. And also be sure to check out the Striker Texas. That's where I upload my game recaps and articles covering RGV FC. Every Wednesday or Thursday is the Striker Tejas podcast, where it's me, Jonathan Check, Joe Rodriguez, Mark Bay, Roberto Silva, and Ross, where we talk about all of the Texas USL teams in the podcast. And Jacob, where can they find you at?
You can find me on Twitter at JacobYoung456. And if you like racing or any video game content, you can find me on Twitch at The Overreacted Gamer.
Well, so be sure to give them a follow. So guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Y'all be safe out there. Let's go on Saturday. Let's go to the stadium. Let's go cheer on the Toros. Let's help them kind of revert the situation. And guys, I know we've kind of been a little bit critical about the team, but that doesn't mean we don't, we don't support this team. We don't want this team to do well. In fact, the reason why we're pointing out some of these things that we don't like about the team is because we know this team can be a whole lot better, and they can improve, and we have the talent to do so. So just putting it out there for those of you that are on social media, or I've heard seen some situations where people say that we're too negative about this team, whether it's players or other fans, whatever. Guys, it's just analysis. We're not being disrespectful about it. So there's that. But guys, y'all take care. Have a very safe rest of the week and weekend. And we'll see y'all next Wednesday at 8 p.m. for another episode of Down in the Valley. Take care.